Moving right along. So excited to have you, Benny, join us. And Benny is my co-chair for our Make Housing Great Again. And then, is it on?
Test.
There we go. And Jill is a senior advisor to the president at AFPI, as well as she has like 50 hats, like most of us, I think. Our policy expert on our housing initiative and a lot of our economic work and our campaign, our policy campaign. But I want to jump right into this. And Benny, I want to start with you. Yesterday was a really big day. The president, you had an interview on your show, but the president talked about getting institutional investors out of housing, and that's such.
I would love to interview the president on my show. Can you please make that happen? Yeah, can we manifest that here today?
Done.
We did manifest.
Yeah.
BlackRock should not be owning all the homes in America.
That's right.
A third of the homes that were bought in Florida in the last quarter were from private capital, institutional capital, venture capital. Those are not people. And we can swagger jack and punch right in the face and bloody the nose of the left right now by taking their key issue, which is corporations are not people. And they shouldn't be owning American homes. Americans that want families, which is, by the way, extremely right-wing coded, so those are our people, Americans that are making babies, having families, starting that most critical element of buying in the entry on-ramp into the economy is what I call it. Every young person needs one. It's not an Xbox. It's not an OnlyFans subscription. The on-ramp into the economy is buying a home. Without it, you have no buy-in. You ain't a man if you don't got land. That's what my grandfather used to say. And so, sorry to grab your question like this so aggressively, but it's so exciting for me to see that because suddenly you box out, and Kellyanne knows how brilliant the president is at this, you force them to defend the indefensible. You make them eat it like they were a dog. Make them defend BlackRock. Suddenly AOC's out here with Bernie Sanders being like, I gotta defend Vanguard? Like, stay away from the multi-trillion-dollar corporation, right? You force the Democrats to defend that. It's a masterstroke move. It's something we've been calling for. It's something we're so excited about. You gotta pair it with ending federal housing, backed mortgages for H-1Bs. That's a total scam. And then pair it with also mass deportations of 30 million criminal aliens in this country that don't belong here. The Trump administration is doing all three. It is a bright and sunny day for housing for young people in America.
That's awesome. And Jill, to follow up on that, there's some additional steps that can be taken. We were talking about this a little bit yesterday. I wanted to get your thoughts on how do you take this even further into home ownership with some of these companies that have bought all this property in single-family homes?
Yeah, just a couple of things. Maybe taking one step back, the problem that we have with housing unaffordably is that the price of housing and housing costs have been increasing about 150% over the last 25 years. Wages have increased by 100%. And so if you imagine the graph, it's going like this, and the pain, that's why particularly Gen Z is really experiencing this pain, and you have the first-time home buyer is now aged 40. And so it's not as if, the American dream feels out of reach. It's that the goal keeps moving further and further away. And so to accomplish this, and I think the president's right on point, I'd also think, we have a builder-in-chief. And we have someone who knows where the costs are in housing. And so also just personally, I've led a parallel life, both in policy and then also 2 decades in real estate development. So what I'm saying is also the pain I've experienced. So $94,000 of costs is attributed to government fees, permitting, and the bureaucracy of approvals. And so what we need is also to pull out those costs and to, I don't know if many of y'all have had the experience of just trying to get a home built in your local neighborhood, and you think something would take weeks and then 6 months later. And so what we need are really a forcing function to force our local communities and to encourage our local communities to shorten that time and to root out these costs of housing. And so that's another piece of it. I think what we'll experience over the next couple of months and what folks are seeing in 2026 with the working family tax cut is that the after taxes, what folks are experiencing with their tax cuts and getting more after tax wages. So the wages are going up, and now what we need to do is work on also the cost side of it and pulling those costs down, so this curve can compress and that people can start affording homes.
And Vinny, she just hit one of your points, I think, about Gen Z, with Americans, Gen Z specifically, young Americans delaying starting a family, delaying marriage because of the cost of housing. And so what does that do to our country long term?
Well, we're already experiencing population collapse. Americans will go extinct. So will Koreans, so will Japanese, so will the Chinese, which are actually on the fastest extinction arc in the world right now, because they're not taking care of their young people. Because older generations are pulling up the ladder and shutting the door, and because the leaders are not focusing on the thing that actually creates families. And what is that? Housing creates families. You go to small universities, community college, you talk to a group of 10 kids. Or if you go to Auburn, we just did this, and talk to 10,000 kids, you get the same responses when you ask, do you want, as a man, you talk to a young man, you go, do you want to be married someday? Do you want to get married? And the vast majority of men raised their hands. And he said, you want to bring your wife home on your wedding night to the frat house? And they all like the whole room will laugh, right? Because it's unspeakable, right, to do such a thing. But if you ask those young men, do you also want to bring your wife home to a rented apartment building where you're living with 1,000 strangers? Is that the first home that you want? If you ask those young women in the audience, do you want to be mothers? Do you want to bring your newborn baby home to a bunch of strangers with the elevator, with a dog that poops, in the elevator, and a bunch of creepy, tech weirdos that live in the building with you? They don't want that. They want, in their blood, in their bones, in their DNA, housing. It's been woven into the American identity that private property and home ownership is something that we must aspire to. And young Americans who grow up here and who are raised here know that. But if you steal housing from them, if you keep housing from them, as you just said, to the age of 40, I mean, that's an obscenity. That's actually probably the single worst data point in the country right now, because that spells doom. That spells extinction for our people. You're not going to start you're not going to get married. You're not going to start a family at 40. That is non-optimal time to be doing that. That is outside the optimal window of fertility for young people. And that means that you're getting started at a much later, you're gonna have less kids. You're gonna really collapse the society if you keep pushing the module of family creation, which is private property and home ownership, further and further and further away from the young people that can actually do those kind of things. And so that is a critical issue. This is why Charlie, in his last days on this earth before God took him home, was working so doggedly on this issue, because this will be the defining issue. You can right-wing code Gen Z, Gen Alpha, and Millennials for the next 100 years if you are able to solve this issue for them. They want it, and the left is providing no solutions. I'll end this long speech with this. Today, at the top of my feed, is Mondami's housing advisor handing us this issue on a silver platter. Understand the moment that we're living in right now. Mondami's housing advisor is saying that housing is so unaffordable, in fact, that we should just ignore it. And we should move on to renting. That should be the goal of all corporate America, and all Americans should be permanent renting. And that would be better for our society. And that should be what you want. I can tell you this. I speak with students in arenas. That's not what they want. No one wants to be a permanent renter. Not only that, she goes a step further. She says housing is right-wing coded, that you should not want that. That's just that's what evil conservatives and capitalists want you to want, right? Is the Norman Rockwell painting with the white picket fence and the Labrador and the dogs and the rocking chair and sitting there with your shotgun, right? Waiting for your daughter to come home from her date. That's what all young men want, right? And I speak with young men at scale around the country. They want that. They want the life that their grandfather had. The older we get, the more we realize our grandfathers had it figured out, man, And they were wiser, actually, than we ever gave them credit for. And those men and those women, they had long and happy lives in these single-family homes, and they displayed the American dream for us. The left is handing it to us on a silver platter right now. Mondami, I have it on my I have it on my phone. Don't want to play it for you. But she was on an interview today saying, we give up. We'll surrender on this issue and give the right housing. We must seize this historic moment, and we can right-wing code young people who care about this issue more than anyone for an entire generation. It's awesome.
Well, I think that this is why housing is such an America First issue as well. And so one of the things that we've been looking at is, from a policy perspective, how do we make that dream, how do we make it achievable for these young men and women to have the homes and to create their future and their children and their children's children. And having land ownership, to your point, is the best investment you can make too, in terms of generational wealth and growing. And Jill, we talked about, you mentioned earlier, wage growth has occurred, but yet there's these other factors that are making it unaffordable. What are those factors, and what are the solutions to those, so we can basically, take this issue and run and provide the solutions and give the hope to those 39% of young people who don't know what America First is?
I want to also, I'll build from your point and address your point. So there's something called a success sequence. And that is, if you follow these steps, the likelihood of you being in poverty is negligible. And it was proven with a study done with Millennials. And the steps are, you get an education, so really high school, you get a job, and then you get married. And what they found is that Millennials were only 3% ended up in poverty if they followed that success sequence. What we're at right now is, with Gen Z, is 84% of Gen Z are delaying a life milestone because they cannot afford to buy a home. And so the implications of this are not, geez, it's sad that this Gen Z cannot buy a home. The implications are, what does that mean for our society if we are putting an entire generation on a path towards poverty? What does it mean towards America's competitiveness if we have a generation which, as it stands now, Gen Z is sitting with over $90,000 worth of debt, and it's not all student debt. And so we have a indebted generation at record levels, and they're on a path to poverty. And what does that mean for America's competitiveness, particularly in today's arms race with our foreign adversaries? And so that's the implications. And so how can we get there? And again, I go back to, we have a builder-in-chief, as Kellyanne had said, who tackles the problems that previous administrations have really created for us. And so, some specific policies. Number one is we have, and I'll just go through a couple of examples, and we're going to be releasing a housing issue brief, close to 20 pages. So I'm sure everybody will be looking for something to do next week. So I'll provide that for you.
Love you call a 20-page document issue brief.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
exactly.
This
policy
is
side.
Washington, yes.
Exactly. And so one of those is a lot of us know 529 accounts, so education savings accounts. And what we are proposing is, let's unlock our 529 accounts and enable those account holders to invest in housing for their beneficiaries, so first-time homebuyer children. And I think that fits with a lot of what conservatives are saying, which is, the best thing that we can do for a child is not send them to Colombia to end up with, a couple $100,000 worth of debt and finding themselves in Europe, but rather, let's buy them a house and enable them to go to a trade school, or enable them to go to a school that directly leads to a job. And so that's one, is let's unlock our 529 accounts. But let's also encourage, when we unlock those accounts, let's encourage those states and communities to deregulate and reduce those costs. Secondly, let's also have a mortgage product. One of the issues that we have with affording to buy a home is that it is the interest rates are at a point where it just becomes unaffordable, and the house that they can afford is just not suitable for their family, or there's no starter home houses at a price point they can afford. And so if we have a mortgage product that the federal government can reduce the fees and encourage, that's at 5%, and also 5% in an area that is reduce the fees. So let's imagine this. Let's imagine that you're in a car with your realtor, and your realtor said, hey, in this area in North Carolina, they've reduced their fees, and so you're eligible for a 5% mortgage. Now, when we cross over here across the highway, they didn't reduce their fees, so your mortgage will just be whatever the going rate is. You can imagine what people will do. And so if we have a forcing function, if we encourage local communities to cut the red tape, it'll serve almost like a bowling ball to knock down the pins and make it less costly to build for future projects. And so those are just two examples that, to share right now.
So you talk about eliminating those regulations. And when I think about regulations, the first thing I think about is California. Because California, the People's Republic of California, has some of the most intense regulations. We've seen mass exodus out of California into states like Texas and Florida. And we've seen even recently, more recently, yesterday was the 1-year anniversary of the Palisades, where here you have a governor who promised to fast track all of the permitting for housing for people in LA, in Palisades, to rebuild, and they haven't rebuilt any homes. And so it's been a whole year since that has happened. You're going there next week, Benny. What have you been finding out about California and the fraud of the housing crisis there?
Again, it is just like a Mandami level set piece. God is just giving us this issue on the whole chess table from end to end. So you have Mandami in New York who's saying that no one should have a home. Like homeownership is right-wing coded and everyone should be a permanent renter. And then you have Gavin Newsom on the other coast saying, well, listen, if all of your houses get torched to cinders, 7,000 homes burnt to the ground in the Palisades, that I will not lift a finger. In fact, I'm going to make sure that you will never get back into your house ever again. And we all knew that was going to happen. Is there a single raise your hand if you believed Gavin Newsom when he said, we're going to cut red tape and we're going to cut red tape and let you all build your houses here again. It's going to be great. It's like bullshit. We all knew exactly what was going to happen, and it's happening now. That is why next week there's going to be members of the Trump administration, high-ranking cabinet-level members of the Trump administration that are going to be on the ground exposing this fraud and, most importantly, showing the American people that there is a party that actually cares. Remember, the president wasn't even sworn into office when he flew out there in the Osprey. It was so kick-ass. It was so cool to see. But President Trump was doing more for those poor people than the leaders of California have. And now they are panicking. You can see it in their social media posts. You can see it in how they're interacting with this issue. They're terrified. Yesterday, there was a massive rally in front of the ashes of the Palisades. Spencer Pratt, I think he's a documentary filmmaker, theologian and intellectual. I think he's a
crystal seller and butterfly
maybe he has a sinecure here in one the Cato Institute. Yeah. So Spencer Pratt, reality star, is announcing for mayor on this issue. And he's going to do great in LA. I don't know if he's going to win Kellyanne. I'm not sure. But I endorsed him. Rick Grinnell just straight up endorsed him out of the gate. A bunch of people are endorsing him because this issue is such a winning issue. It has been, it is so painful to somebody to attack them in their home. We all understand and recognize as a society. When your friends, if you're a young person or if you're an old person or whatever, when your friends, when a young family buys their first home, it's almost more significant than having their first child. It's like this moment where you're like, wow, you're buying in to the American dream. You're taking a piece of this kind of, you have investment here. Man, you're making babies? That's great. You're buying land and property? That's great. It's the first thing in the book of Genesis that God asks us to do, actually. The first commands from God is go tend to the garden, go make sure that your garden is set, and then go procreate. Go forth and be fruitful and multiply is the first command from God to us. And by the way, we're the only people, our movement's the only people that does that. Buying homes and then also having families. It's so violative. And I'm sorry for going on a rant here, but it's unbelievably violative what the Democrats have done in California. It's unspeakable. There were so many families that were being raised in the Palisades, so many people that had their cherished lives and memories. I know members of the administration who had who had family homes and boyhood and childhood homes there, that they feel this very personally. And we've never been given an easier shot on goal. It's a total own goal. If the Democrats were smart, they're not. If the Democrats were smart, then they would have seized this moment and shown that they could rebuild for the family. But right now, it is a moment for us, and we're going to go out there, we're going to expose it. We're going to go to the Palisades. We're going to walk around with Spencer Pratt and a bunch of other people who've lost homes there. Adam Carolla is one of them. Grant Cardone, his house is half burned right on the beach in Billionaires Row. He can't even get into it, right? We're going to go there. We're going to tell those stories. They've been totally abandoned by the Democrats in California, and every American understands what a violation that is to attack someone inside of their home. So that's what they're doing. We're going to go expose it. We're going to go investigate. There's obviously enormous amounts of fraud there as well, and it's going to be a very, very bad day for Gavin Newsom.
It's also, when you think longer term, this is a man who wants to be the next president of the United States. And I think about what happened during the Biden administration in Maui, in East Palestine, in North Carolina, and the response from the Biden regime, and imagine a Newsom leading something like that in other states is actually unfathomable how disastrous it would be for the people of our country. And so this is a perfect example, a warning for all of us about the importance of this issue. Jill, I know we're wrapping up a little bit here, but if we can do
just real fast before you move off Lahaina, do you remember when Joe Biden fell asleep at the victims' dinner in Lahaina? So all their homes were torched to the ground, by the way, through government incompetence. If you actually study why the fire burned that city to cinders, just like in California, through Democrat government incompetence and the inability to let firefighters fight fires because of some, animal or bug, they let those poor people, working class people, the servers at the resorts, the people who did not have much in Hawaii. Oprah was perfectly safe in her plantation on a mountainside. Never opened that up, by the way. She owns like something like 7,000 acres. Never opened up any of those acres. Why would that be, Kellyanne? Never opened up her I thought she was.
But she wants to open our borders.
Yeah, that's
Weird.
right. Never opened up her own plantation for any of the victims. But Joe Biden fell asleep. There's video of him nodding off and catching himself falling asleep at the victims' dinner. They're handing it to us. We can seize it. We can own it. We should be excited to talk about housing. We should be excited to talk about affordable housing. It should be in every single message that we have. And I just want to do one really quick announcement before I stop monopolizing your question. I'm sorry. We're going to take this issue to the American people.
Jill, closing thought, if we can do two things this year through executive action, if we could draft the EO, draft model policy, what are two things that could directly impact, besides the 529, this year that could help the American people?
So first, I have the first college stop for you. So Duke University. So I'll help you out for that. How fun would that be? So two things. Number one, I think it would be whatever we can do to reduce the cost of housing. And so our vice president talked about illegals and illegal immigrants or illegal aliens that have flooded the country. And it's simple math. If you just take up some of the supply of housing, it can't help but increase the cost of housing. And so to the extent we can make building housing great again, to the extent we can increase the supply of housing and we can cut the red tape, that will be phenomenal. So I think that is a key component. And I think I'll just use my second point to also highlight a big win that this president has done, and that is opportunity zones. And so the president has created a program that has attracted over $100 billion of investment in low-income communities. And what that's led to is 1 million people lifted out of poverty. And AFPI alum HUD Secretary Turner was a key when he served as the executive director for the White House Council of Opportunity and Revitalization Council, and I know Kellyanne was there during that time. And so that model of leveraging private investment and into housing, and there was a study that determined that over 300,000 housing units, so it created more, but 300,000 housing units were directly created because of opportunity zones. So but not for this opportunity zone program, you wouldn't have 300,000 homes created in areas that needed these homes. And so the point is these next steps with housing and what we can do to make housing affordable again, we need to fire on all cylinders. We need to engage with the private sector. We need to pressure the private sector, what we're seeing with the present talk about Wall Street. And my hope is that that can be used also for those who are guilty of buying up all the homes to announce programs that are rent-to-own programs, and let's make housing affordable again. I think let's make building great again, and I'm very excited with our partnership and with your leadership, Ashley, in making this happen.
Well, thank you both so much. Any closing thoughts, Benny?
Make them own it. Make them own it. We're going to make them do it. We're going to drag them out. We're going to go to the biggest schools in America. We're going to take administration, cabinet level officials. We're going to stand in front of 10,000 students. We're going to have an open mic, and we're going to talk this issue. Not just this issue. We're going to talk a lot of wins of the administration. And we're going to make the left own it. Force them to tell you, what's your solution on housing exactly? Mandami, what is it? Explain. What will they say? What are they going to say, Kellyanne? Yep, yeah, that's right. Communism is what they're going to say. Yeah, sure, communism. Everyone go live in your slum. Everyone go to Caracas, right? That's what they're going to say.
Not everyone. He lives in Gracie Mansion.
Okay, well, there you go. That's what they're going to say. And they've handed us this issue. It's a generational opportunity and moment. We're very excited to seize it. We got all the energy at our back. I feel like we have a divine providence, actually, on this issue. This is what God wants us to do because this is what God commands us as to go out, make families, make babies, and seize the land, right? And tend the garden. And so we're the only party that believes in God. Another fun poll. I'll have my own polling. Here's my final poll I'll leave you with. 93% of Republicans believe in God. 59% of Democrats believe in God. Well, okay, that's like half. Let's just round down. So, we're the only party that actually even believes in procreation. This is our issue. You want a home to have a family. If you're a dink, dual income, no kids, do you really need an actual home with a yard, right? I don't know. But I know this. If you have 4 kids, like I do, 4 kids 5 and under, I've had a kid every single year since moving to Florida. It's been magnificent. I would highly recommend it, by the way. Solve the population crisis. You want that, and you're following through on what truly makes life purposeful and meaningful, and young people know it in their bones. And so by giving them that and opening up this opportunity, it's signaling one simple thing, and this is the only thing that we have to message. We care about you. We hear you. We care about your future. We don't want to doom you to some slum in Caracas. You can have a true, great American future. You can have a better future than we had growing up, right? And that if you signal that to young people, that we hear you and we care about you, this was the magic of Charlie. He went to those campuses, and yes, he said he had a lot of bangers, but he listened. He put his mic down, right? And he let the students talk, and he listened to them. He absorbed. That was the magic. Right?
Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining us. Thank you so much, Kellyanne, for being a part of this as well and a part of AFPI. And just want to say we're so grateful for all of your support, your time, your talent, your treasure, all the things. And let's kick ass this year.
Let's kick ass.
If you want more information about the policy products and the opportunities and the news on what we just heard, AmericaFirstPolicy.com. Thank you all so much for being here. It's a blessing.